Before we get started, we have a few special guests in the audience that I'd like to recognize tonight, and I'll start with asking you to join me in welcoming Tobin Ryan, Congressman Ryan's brother. Tobin. Also with us tonight are Ventura County elected officials Peter Forey and Mark Lunn. Please give a warm welcome to a former and absolutely terrific Congressman, Elton Gallegly, and his lovely wife, Janice. And from the Simi Valley City Council, Keith Mashburn. Keith. Okay, so today we welcome to the Reagan Library two of America's best known and most respected voices. 2012 Republican Vice Presidential nominee and House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan, and President Reagan's Education Secretary, President George H.W. Bush's Director of National Drug Control Policy, and nationally syndicated talk radio host Bill Bennett. Bill. So, on today's agenda, a discussion between these two great American leaders centering on Congressman Ryan's new book, The Way Forward, Renewing the American Idea. By the way, we just learned that Paul's book is debuting at number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list. Now, if everyone here cooperates and buys a book or two tonight, I am sure we could put Paul in the number 1 spot. Okay. One of the central focuses of Paul's book, and of course his leadership in Congress, is federal spending. President Reagan reminded us that, quote, "We don't have $1 trillion debt because we tax too little. We have $1 trillion debt because we spend too much." Think of that, Paul, a meager $1 trillion debt. Boy, those were the days. No American has been more articulate or insistent about the urgency of making the United States government live within its means without crushing the American economy with taxes than Paul Ryan. Not once, but year after year, Chairman Ryan has authored detailed plans for moving the federal budget into balance, first in a 10-year time frame, more recently in a 5-year one. He has put forward plans for rescuing Medicare and Social Security too. With our national debt as a proportion of GDP approaching Greece's, and unfunded liabilities in Social Security and Medicare dwarfing even that, you would think his proposals would be greeted with cheers on all sides. The reality is summed up in one word, an understatement, really, that commentator Michael Barone has used to describe Paul's efforts: brave. So, who is this brave man? Coming from Janesville, Wisconsin, he lives in the neighborhood in which he grew up. And I mean he lives there. He hasn't bought a house in Washington. He hasn't moved his family there. He sleeps on a cot in his office and flies home on weekends to be with his constituents. Think of that. He is a graduate of Miami of Ohio. Actually, it was in college that he got his first taste of celebrity, make that notoriety. His summer job back home one year was driving what the Almanac of American Politics describes as the incomparable Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. He intended to go to graduate school, but his brilliance kept landing him job after job that were too attractive to pass up, including speechwriter to Ronald Reagan's friend and close ally, Congressman Jack Kemp, and later working with Jack and Bill Bennett at Empower America. In 1998, then only 28 years old, Paul was elected Congress. So soon, this young man, who has told audiences that as a teenager he read the federal budget for fun, was showing the deep knowledge of U.S. government finances. It was his courage in confronting the nation's building debt crisis that vaulted him to the House Budget Committee within a decade of entering the House and brought him to the attention of Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney. There, he took a place on the GOP national ticket. So what is next for this extraordinary man? Well, as I said, Chairman Ryan has just come out with this new book that he and Bill will discuss today. He is a man with deep and broad vision of the country and serious ideas for its future. This is Paul's third appearance at the Reagan Library. Bill, who is also a longtime friend of the Reagan Foundation, last spoke here in February. That was on the occasion of President Reagan's 103rd birthday, and I am here to tell you that Bill did the president an honor that was absolutely unmatched. As always, it is a pleasure to have both of them with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to please join me in welcoming to the stage Bill Bennett and Congressman Paul Ryan.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This evening is brought to you by the California Health and Longevity Center. This is before and after. And all those distinguished jobs I held, you're right, John, I was always mistaken for security. I didn't think I was the real thing. Let me just be sentimental for a second. I just think the world of this guy. I am, if I might say, just so proud of him and what he has done. What right do I have to say that I'm proud of him? Because when I knew him, he was a pretty young guy. He was a staff assistant at Empower America, researcher. And I heard Paul say once, I used to carry Bill Bennett's coffee in one hand and the Book of Virtues in the other hand. I've repeated that, and now I walk around saying, I know Paul Ryan. I know Paul Ryan. But it's been extraordinary. You're what this country is about. And as they said of James Madison, in him, the spirit of America is personified. And that's what I think of this guy. Now, that aside, why were you doing Sean Hannity's radio show today and not my radio show?
One's really early in the morning and one's in the afternoon.
Yeah. What time do you get up when you go hunting?
5.
Okay, you can do it. Anyway, maybe not in California. I want to tell one story because I'm so proud of it. Paul has great interest and achievement record in the Colorado Rockies, climbing these mountains. We have climbed a couple of Rockies together, at least one. And on the last trip we went, which was the summer before Mitt Romney gave you a call, we were climbing Chavano Peak, and I've seen Paul on the trail before, and he will say things like, should we run up this mountain? But today, on that particular day, he just said, why don't we all hike together? I said, why don't we not? Why don't we go at our own pace? So we went at our own pace. Soon Paul was a speck in the distance running up the mountain. I stopped often and on the trail. People started to pass me. One guy stopped and he said, hey, how long have you been on the trail? I said, too many hours, actually. He said, I heard Paul Ryan is on this trail. Is that true? I said, yeah, he's about 4 miles up the trail here. The guy said, yeah, I heard that. He said, I heard Bill Bennett's on it too. I said, haven't seen him. Don't know anything about it. Anyway, you can match if
I remember that guy. I think he was a college professor.
Yeah, he was a college professor. I want to start with this, and then I have a question from the audience, and wonderful questions from the audience, Paul. On a cold February night, 1981, you were 11? Yeah, I know. I know. Don't rub it in. Our family wrapped up dinner and my dad turned on the TV. He was excited to see President Reagan deliver his first speech before Congress since being elected to the presidency. The president said, this is very much the theme of this wonderful book, I quote the president, "Together we can embark on this road not to make things easy, but to make things better. Our social, political, and cultural, as well as our economic institutions, can no longer absorb the repeated shocks that have been dealt them over the past decades. Can we do the job? The answer is yes, but we must begin now. We're in control here. There's nothing wrong with America that together we can't fix." Close quote. And you write, and for the first time in a long time, millions of Americans believed that again. And a lot of this book is about why we should believe it and why we can believe it again. The audience question from Joanne is, what do you think, as we are sitting here in this place, Paul, is the most important legacy of Ronald Reagan that needs to be revived today?
He made us believe in our country again, and he provided the kind of leadership that was necessary to get the American idea back on track. I opened the book with Reagan, and I closed the book with Reagan.
Right.
I did so because I obviously came of age. You know, my childhood was Ronald Reagan. It's where I was first introduced to politics, to leadership. I don't come from a political family. I'm the only public sector person. They all thought I was nuts doing it in the beginning. But Ronald Reagan was an Irish guy who lived 2 hours south down the same river we live on, the Rock River, in Dixon, Illinois. And so my dad thought that was just the neatest thing. Just a guy from downstream, small town, can go and do what he did. And so that was something that was special for our family. What I got out of the Ronald Reagan presidency was, here was a leader who was not afraid to fly the bright colors and put aside the pale pastels, and who saw the pressing problems of the day where the country itself and the idea of the country was in doubt, at risk. Carter's stagflation, the Cold War, everybody knows that story. But what he was able to do was to amass a movement to get the country to rally together, to have the kind of an affirming election in 1980 where a majority of Americans said, we want to go in that direction, we believe in this. And then he got elected. He brought a Senate with him. And that's when Democrats, that's when you do a few things together, Kemp, Roth, and the rest. And he did what he said he would do, and he turned the country around. He met the moment, he stared at history, and he changed the country for the better in a lasting, generational, lasting way. And so what I see with that is that's exactly what we have to do again.
Exactly right.
It's been done before, let's do it again.
Quite right, and everyone should get this book. It begins with Reagan, and it ends with Reagan. And I mentioned it a few times, but it's really mostly Kemp. You know, that's the way it goes. No, I'm kidding. This is all I can do. Have you ever known someone when they were 18 years old and they never stopped being 18 years old to you? I have to remind myself to call him Mr. Chairman. Yeah. I didn't really count the Bennett references and the Kemp references, but it's pretty obvious where it is. Anyway, you and Jack formed a very special relationship. What was it about Jack Kemp? I remember so many things about him. One of the times I was here, John, you remember, Jack came in the back, and I said, Jack, come up and say hello, which was a big mistake on my part, because I didn't get the mic back. God love him, he was fascinating, though. What was it about Jack Kemp that drew you to him? And I know, you did some work with us at our end of the office, but you mostly worked with Jack. And what were the ideas? Because I'm thinking what you said about Ronald Reagan, and that same optimism, right, that same sense of belief in the country animated Jack.
First off, when you lose your dad as a young age as a guy, you gravitate to mentors. And so I went through life looking to mentors, you being one of them, and Jack.
Too late now, Paul. Don't,
okay.
Just...
You know the story.
Yeah, I can't stop. It's terrible.
so I was in love with economics, and that's what I thought I wanted to do with my life, was practice in the field of economics. It was Jack's infectious enthusiasm, his ability to breathe life and vision into what were important principles and show people how they made lives better. What he taught me was public service and public life and public policy is a great calling and a great vocation. So if you grow up where, you know, your dad dies at 55, his dad dies at 57, and his dad dies at 59, you kind of grow up with a sense of life is short, you better make the most of it. And that's just the sense I always had. And what his mentorship to me meant was not only can you make a big difference, but this is exciting.
Yeah.
And so he brought this young conservative into an exciting conservatism. Not a dour, suck-on-lemon conservatism, but an exciting conservatism where he proselytized the value of free markets and free enterprise and first principles and brought them to life and made it exciting. And it's that kind of conservatism that got me into this. And it's that kind of conservatism to me that is necessary to reconstruct a movement in this country, a conservative movement in this country that's principled, that's inclusive, that's aspiring, and therefore appealing and capable of winning a majority of the country so that we can have another 1980s-like election.
Great. Do you, yes, sure. Let's tell a couple of stories. Shakespeare says, give to abstraction a local habitation and a name. You tell a tale of two cities in the book. Janesville, Wisconsin, where you grew up, and Detroit, Michigan. I always think of Detroit in terms of World War II. This was the arsenal of democracy.
Right.
Detroit defeated the Germans. Where were those tanks coming from in the Battle of the Bulge? Those German generals said they were coming out of Detroit. Tell us about Janesville and Detroit.
So one of the things that I think is important as a part of what I refer to as full spectrum conservatism is we as conservatives have to also speak about that important space between ourselves and our government, which is where we live our lives, which you and many call civil society, which is our communities, sort of the fibers that bring us together through voluntary associations, our churches, our charities, our civic organizations, our friendships, our neighborhoods. And growing up in Janesville, Jana and I, we have 3 kids. You can see the picture on the back of the book there. We live on the block that we grew up on. I live a block from my brother Tobin. Counted it up this morning because I was asked this question again. There are 10 Ryan households within 8 blocks of where we live. Tobin and I counted it up a couple of years ago. Last time we added it up, we had 67 cousins in Janesville. Irish Catholics do things like that. So I wanted to contrast Janesville and the civil society, but also Janesville was a GM town. And the whole mantra in Janesville for 85 years when we had this factory, which was basically the employment center of our city, was as GM goes, so goes Janesville. And Detroit was the epicenter. And so we always grew up knowing that. And the important contrast here is Janesville got knocked down. Janesville lost our GM plant. You take a couple $100 million of payroll outside of a city of 60,000, it can bring a city to its knees. But what I witnessed, both when our dad died and our mom needed assistance and our grandma was fighting Alzheimer's and when we lost our plant, was a community that came together to heal, to help people who were falling down. We have lots of friends that Tobin and I went to high school with who thought, like their parents, they could have the same job for the rest of their life at the plant, get a great standard of living, have a great family, and then they lose it and there's nothing close to replace it. But Janesville's been healing and doing well, and it's got its problems. But then you look at Detroit, and it's a cautionary tale of what could come to the rest of the country if we follow those kinds of economics, if we follow the kind of government that they had, if we follow what they did, which is they borrowed and they spent and they taxed till they had no more government, until they went bankrupt. And they are the biggest city. The marvel of the 20th century is a bankrupt city. Tens of thousands of blighted homes, whole blocks being razed. And so we want to learn from these mistakes. We want to see the differences. And I would argue, as I try to argue here, and I want to equip conservatives with the intellectual ability to take down liberal progressivism and the policies that come from that governing philosophy and show what they can materialize in, like a bankruptcy of a major city or to a country if we stay on this same path. The good side of that story is there are good seeds of a comeback in Detroit right now. There are phenomenal people doing amazing things, overcoming difficult circumstances, regenerating in these communities. Civil society is springing root, and I think that hopefully in a handful of years we're going to be talking about this great comeback in Detroit, like hopefully we're going to be talking about this great comeback for a country. But I think this tale of two cities, about a vibrant civil society, about a city gets hit, and about a government that gets out of control, that overpowers, that bankrupts, and all the devastation and the social pathologies that fall from it. These are very important lessons to learn so we don't repeat these same mistakes.
Let's be political, partisan for a minute, or let me be. You decide what you want to say. But, you know, I often talk on my radio show because these reports keep coming in. Business climate, health, growth, red states and blue states. It's extraordinary what the difference is. If you take a look at what, just take a look at a map of red state governors and blue state governors. What do the red state governors do that the blue state governors don't do or don't know?
They tackle their challenges before they get out of control. They balance their budgets. They get their cost of doing business down. I'll just give you an example. Scott Walker and I, he's our great governor, he took on the challenges.
He sure did.
He said, this is what I'm going to do if I get elected. Then he did it. We have a balanced budget. We don't have a debt problem. We don't have a public employee pension problem. Maybe you're sort of familiar with that in California. He's lowering taxes. And I represent the Illinois border, Wisconsin border. And because Scott and I tag team calling businesses, recruiting them to Wisconsin, and they come. Capital is mobile. So businesses are leaving. Illinois is our foil. It's the California of the Midwest economically, where they're cranking up their taxes on businesses, on families, over-regulating huge pension liabilities, and they're just passing the buck, just like what Detroit did. And so governors like Scott Walker and other governors from these Republican states are taking on their challenges. They're getting their act together, and guess what? They're growing their economies. Businesses are locating there. Problem is, they're doing it against the headwind of a federal government that's going in the wrong direction. So the premise of this book is, if you don't like the direction the country is going, which I don't, then as an elected leader, I feel a moral obligation to say how we should do things differently, how we can get it back, how we can have a healthy economy that produces the kinds of jobs and opportunity to get people back to work, and how we can dominate, how we can have the global growth that we need, because we are not in a good place with our economy. It's very soft. Millions of people aren't even being counted in our employment numbers because they just stopped looking for work. I mean, almost 20% of young people between the ages of 21 and 24 are either not working or not even in school. I mean, people in the prime of their lives who should be just on a trajectory are missing out on the American idea, which is the condition of your birth doesn't determine the outcome of your life. That's what Ronald Reagan taught us. That's what the founders gave us. And so I just think that these are cautionary tales, blue state, red state, but also the stories like Detroit. And the whole point here is, let's see it for what it is. Let's reconstitute our founding principles, which are timeless and as relevant as ever before, apply them to the problems of the country, and then show the country what these solutions are and what they look like and what they deliver, and then take it to the country. Give the country a choice. Go back on the old great idea that we have government by consent of the governed. Let's get the consent so we can fix the mess before it gets out of our control.
Great answer, great answer. You said you don't agree with this direction of this administration. Is it educable? In the book, you tell a couple of poignant stories, which many in the audience will recall, a couple of conversations, if not confrontations, with the president at the retreat. I think it was in Baltimore,
right.
Maryland. And then the famous Blair House discussion of Obamacare, where you came on the scene for a lot of people. Of course, that was pretty much immediately followed with the discussion of your roadmap, in which the ads were run, not discussing the merits of your argument, but a figure who's supposed to be you was shown pushing an old lady off a cliff, right? This was
I've seen it.
Yeah, I'll bet you have.
Yeah.
I'll bet you have. Can they learn? Can they learn? You've had these conversations, Paul. You sit with Democrats. You reach out. You try to have these conversations with Chris Van Hollen and for other people. Can't people learn this? Can't they see the results that you've just described? I don't understand why they don't get it when the evidence is right before them. Is this ideology?
Yes, that's the point I make in the book. I think the liberal progressives have taken over and have dominated the Democratic Party. There are Democrats who I'd say would agree with us on some of these points. My Medicare reforms, I worked that out with Alice Rivlin and Ron Wyden. Ron's the Senate Finance Chairman. Alice Rivlin was the Clinton Budget Director. So I do believe that there are Democrats who see these issues and see these problems and are not ideologically stuck in the mud, you know, who've poured concrete around their ankles, but that's the minority of their party. And so I've spent five and a half years trying to work a budget agreement with this administration. It is just, I have become convinced that it's really ideological, that they really do believe in the progressive transformation, that they see themselves as sort of the bookend of the progressive experiment. And that's why I dedicate a pretty good portion of this book of unpacking liberal progressivism, how it's antithetical to our founding, to our Constitution, how it believes in this sort of malleable, unlimited government, living, breathing Constitution, and how it's sort of an end justifies the means approach to governing, whereby we basically delegate our power, our natural rights, to unelected bureaucracies, to better fine-tune and manage progress in history. And I think it's important to understand that there are those who just really believe in this ideology. They're not bad people, they just really believe in this. And so therefore it makes it very difficult for them to embrace policies that they see inconsistent with that philosophy, that governing philosophy.
Right. Let's get into the numbers some. I hesitate to do this because I'm not a numbers guy. You sure are, and you can do it. I remember I asked you once, what do you like to do to relax? And you said, well, a lot of things. I like to hunt, like to be with the family, like to run with the elk herd. Something most of you have done, I'm sure.
Not quite like that, but yeah.
Well, anyway, you said sometimes I like to just kick back, get a couple of beers, and sit around with a few actuaries. Yeah. It's a big Saturday night. Yeah. All right. This is not me. Okay, but let's do the numbers because this is stark and it's important. It can't be said too often. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security.
By the end of the next decade, those three programs plus the interest on the debt will consume 100% of all federal revenues. There will be no money coming into the federal government to go for defense, for education, for anything other than Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest. That's the path we're on. That's the government we've got. That's the kind of debt we're going to be giving to the next generation. And so that's why I started with this budget in 2008, which was a Republican administration at the time, saying we better head this off at the pass before it's too late. The fear I have is if we don't get our handle on this situation fast, if we don't reform these very important earned benefit entitlement programs, like Medicare and Social Security, which I described was very important to my family at a very difficult time, if we don't do that now on our terms, and we can do it in a way that it doesn't affect a person who is in or near retirement, then we'll kick the can down the road, then the debt goes up, then we have interest rates climbing on us, which the Federal Reserve is going to start normalizing pretty soon. Then we don't control the situation. The bond markets control the situation. That's what Europe had. Guess what? You yank the rug out from another safety net. You cut people who are already retired. You have a recession or worse. That's what happens in debt crises. So the most predictable economic problem we will have ever had is this. I remember the 2008 crisis, the crash, the recession, TARP, all of that stuff. Now we look back and we can see, the Community Reinvestment Act and Fannie and Freddie and housing and mortgages and mortgage-backed security. We can now untangle the mess and sort of see what happened. Then we didn't really know. I mean, then it came up as a surprise. And look what happened. This one, we see it coming. And so the whole point that I've been trying to do for the last decade in Congress is to get us to muster the courage and the confidence to take on this challenge before it is out of our control. We in the House Republicans, for 4 years in a row, with Elton Gallegly and the rest, we've passed these budgets. We have done this. But thanks for traveling all this way to come, Elton, by the way. I really appreciate it. Yeah. We've passed this, but right now we have an administration that will not tackle this problem. I am convinced the president will not tackle this fiscal problem. It is going to happen in the next presidency or not.
How long do we have?
You know, the great thing we have is we're the world's reserve currency. We're taking that for granted, I would argue. But I can't imagine we can get through another presidency without this problem blowing up in our faces. So let's just say it's 6 years. Nobody knows the answer to this question. Nobody can peg it. The beauty about this question is we are testing the amazing resiliency of the American person, worker, entrepreneur economy. It's a very resilient economy. But in this global economy, we can't take our dominance for granted. We can't take for granted that we're the great American economy, everybody will come here. I mean, Burger King wants to be Canadian now for all. I mean, it's not like it used to be.
Warren Buffett wants to be.
Yeah, that's right. Warren Buffett wants Burger King to be Canadian. So I really believe, just looking at the numbers, 2018, the debt starts taking off. 10,000 people are retiring each and every day in America today at that pace for 10 years. And the numbers just go like this. You have about a 90% increase in the retirement population, but only a 19% increase in the working population following them into the workforce. Plus the benefits go up about 6 to 8% in cost every year because of health inflation. So we probably have, you know, my guess is, you know, you have to do this within the next presidency.
Let me ask you this, I mentioned this first. It's a very subtle book. It's a very nuanced book. This is not just some pounding the table anti-government tirade. And you just mentioned in passing, Medicare and Social Security were important to your family at a critical point. Tell the story, not the Wisconsin State Fair, but the what fair? The
Rock County 4-H Fair.
I'm sorry, I forgot. The Rock County 4-H Fair. We don't have those in Brooklyn. But the Rock County 4-H Fair is kind of a transformational moment, or at least a moment where you said, wait a second, about the guy coming up to you, because this is one of the nuances.
It's a John
nuances. Gosh, yeah, PhD, Secretary of Education. Nuances. You know what time I get up in the morning, Eastern Time, 3 a.m. All right, anyway, nuances of the book. Tell the story of the fair, please.
So,
thanks.
I had been, like you know, I'm a numbers kind of a guy, and I had been talking about this tax foundation study that said, that examined the American public and said that 60% of American families were net receivers of government, and only 40% were net payers into the government.
Makers and takers is the chapter.
So we conveniently use shorthand of makers and takers, which you know basically said either you receive net or you contribute net. And the inference in that broad brush is that, you know, it makes it look like this group are deadbeats and this group are the contributors. And I have no doubt there are people who want a welfare state, who don't want earned benefits, who want, you know, a transfer payment. That clearly happens, but not all of those people. And I had been using this makers and takers construct, which many of us had at the time. I was shaking hands in front of the Republican tent at the 4-H Fair, which is what I do every year. And this guy from the Democrat tent came over with Democrat buttons and T-shirts on, and he basically said, "Hey, I want to give you a piece of my mind." I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, this is going to be good," you know. But he was very articulate. He said, "Who exactly are the makers and the takers?" I know who the makers are, but the takers, is it the veteran who came back from Iraq who's getting health care? Is it the widow who's on Social Security who paid for it all her life? Is it your grandma, you know, who was on Medicare? Is it, you know, is it the person who earned these things? And he really laid into me, and I just listened to the guy, thought about it as I left the fair that day, went in my truck and grabbed the kids who were on the rides, and went home. And I just thought to myself, you know what, that guy's right. I had disparaged a whole group of people with that clumsy rhetoric, and caused offense where none was intended. As I mentioned, there are those who do want to be, quote unquote, taken care of able-bodied people who want transfer payments. But when my dad died, I got those survivor benefits, which we put away for college. It helped me pay for college. My mom got her survivor benefits, which helped her go back to college so she could learn a skill to start a small business.
Right.
And my grandma who lived with us, who was facing Alzheimer's, was using Medicare and her Social Security, helped us hire a really nice lady who came in every day and stayed with her while my mom and I were off at school.
Yep.
And so we shouldn't disparage people struggling and striving to make a better life for themselves. And that's where I learned that, a safety net is an important thing. It benefited me. And we shouldn't disparage people who need it from time to time, or who worked all their years and then earned it and are using it. And so we have to be a little more sensitive with what we're saying, so we are more communicating who we are and what we believe in. Because if we want to form an inclusive conservative movement that is capable of having a 1980 type of election, we need everybody.
Right.
We need everybody. And we need to be able to understand everybody. And
Good.
if we demean people who are struggling and striving, then we're not going to get everybody. And that's the point. I learned a good lesson, basically.
Yes, great story. Yeah, I wrote in the margin, my son, Joe. Many, what? Oh, hey, good.
Oh, we're kind of used to that.
I thought it was friends of my son. I don't know.
Yeah, once you said, that's right. Once you said your son,
A lot of
Joe.
you met my son, Joe, in February at the birthday. He's the 6'6" Marine who was there at the ceremony. He's a taker, I guess.
Yeah.
Because he gets a paycheck every month from the Marines, but I think he's given back something,
I'll say.
So, I mean, we need to be a little more subtle and nuanced.
That's right.
I mentioned my kid, I want to go to the questions from the audience, but tell your favorite campaign story. I did not know this. I thought I knew everything about you. You came and showed up in Virginia with Romney like Lincoln coming into Washington with a blanket over you, right?
Yeah.
Or am I mixing up two stories?
That was when I went to Beth Meyer's house.
When you went to Beth's house.
Yeah.
Tell that story. It's a fabulous story.
So they make these vice presidential things extremely secretive, right? Because you don't want to leak it out to the media. You want to surprise and announce it on your own terms. I really didn't think he was going to pick me, because I was the guy with all the budget cuts, which, as you can tell, were really popular in the back of the room there.
Yeah.
Believe me, it goes with the territory. But so I wasn't really expecting to be picked. I was speaking to a group of people from the Peoria Chamber of Commerce with my buddy Aaron Schock in the Library of Congress, and Mitt called, said, I need to have a confidential conversation with you. Can I have it right now? I said, well, I'm with about 400 people from Peoria right now. So I stepped outside the Library of Congress and said, I need you to fly to Boston this Sunday.
That's right.
Nobody can know. You got to buy your own plane ticket. You can't tell a soul, of course, except for Jana. And I've got a long conversation I want to have with you. So hung up, talked to Beth Myers, the woman who ran the VP vetting. And I asked her, I said, so are other people coming out? Is this like a final interview? She said, no, this is it, unless you really screw it up. So I went down to O'Hare, super early flight, flew to Hartford, Connecticut with, baseball hat on and, just kind of grungy clothes. And her Beth's 19-year-old son, Kurt, picked me up, drove me to her house, but in the last few miles, because we all had trackers on us. I had NBC and ABC and MSNBC all camped out on my lawn. We had to sneak out from the trackers. Beth had trackers. So I had to lay down in the back of the car with a blanket over my head. They drove me into her garage. Then I got up, went into her house, and then Mitch showed up, and then we had a long conversation about the country, and that's when he asked me to join
Lincoln
the ticket.
coming into Washington, folks, remember? Yeah, that's right.
So,
quickly, because I just can't resist the personal stuff, you had a little trouble persuading your family about this. Was it Charlie in the swimming pool?
Yeah, Sam in the swimming pool, Charlie, and a lot of crying, yeah.
Okay, but Sam in the swimming pool, I love this.
We have one of those neighborhoods where your kids play interchangeably with all the other kids, and we knew if we told our kids about this, we had 6 days notice from when we were asked to when we were announced, had to keep it under wraps, and so we couldn't tell our kids because we knew they would tell their friends, and then it just goes on and on and on, you know what I mean? It's just whoosh. So we decided to tell our kids, rightly or wrongly, on the way down, on the airplane down. So Janet snuck the kids out of the house in the backyard earlier in the day. I snuck out to evade the trackers, and so we get on this plane, which was really strange to my kids. And we told them when we got on the plane why we were doing this, that Mitt Romney had asked me to join the ticket. We were going down to make the announcement. And my daughter Liza had already sort of figured it out, but was keeping it to herself. Girls mature a lot faster than boys, by the way, in case she really had this wired, and she was excited. She sort of understood. Charlie said, wait a second, does this mean we have to leave Janesville? I said, well, yeah, it does if we win. And just all the tears started coming, and just the tears. And Sam, the youngest, who was 7 then, really upset. And I said, well, if we do win, we go to a house with a swimming pool. And that stopped Sam in his tracks.
You bet.
And he said, well, I suppose I could do it if there's a swimming pool at the house.
That's it.
Charlie, it took them about a month to get okay with it. They love our community. And,
you bet. Yeah. Yeah, you're right about your daughter, but it's fathers and daughters too, and that's your daughter.
Oh yeah.
This charming picture in your office. Can you describe it with the pink fingernail polish?
Yeah, it's the one where PETA gave me the Worst Dad of the Year award.
That's right.
PETA's this. I don't even know what PETA. Yeah, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I'm a big deer hunter, so we bought my daughter a nice deer rifle. Fit for a kid, 243, which is a kid caliber.
Sure.
And my daughter got a really nice 10-pointer. And so we have a nice photo in my office of my daughter with her 10-pointer and her pink fingernails. And PETA gave me the Worst Dad of the Year award for it, which we proudly display, where we hunt, along with a picture of my daughter with her deer hunt.
Wonderful. Precious child with the fingernail polish and the deer head. It's just wonderful. Right next to Bart Starr, I think, in the Packers, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Let me go to audience questions because they're wonderful questions. We've talked about, everybody identifies you as chairman of the Budget Committee and your vision for the future, and the roadmap, and the other things you've done, and the warnings you've given us. But we are enmeshed in a lot of foreign policy problems right now. We found out today from the president, in his own words, that we do not have a strategy to take on some of the worst killers the world has ever seen, who have declared war against us, cut off the head of an American because he was an American, and said that they were coming after the rest of us. The president said we don't have a strategy, and announced to the world, therefore, that we don't have a strategy.
That's right.
Including to these guys. One of the questions is, what are the next logical steps for the U.S. in regard to ISIS or ISIL? What should we do, Paul?
Stop making colossal mistakes, number one.
Right.
He made a colossal mistake in Syria. Whether you agree with the red line or not, when you, as the President of the United States, say something so definitively and then don't do it, they're taking your stock, they're taking your measure. They, meaning the world. Number two, failure to get that status of forces agreement in Iraq, to keep the gains we bled for, we paid for, to keep the Iraqis together, to keep their military operational, has brought us to where this vacuum was created, where this terrorist group, which, by the way, the intelligence community has been telling us about ISIS for some time now. This didn't just pop up to policymakers who've been studying the issue. It's been coming. They came fast, but they're like Al-Qaeda 3.0. They're very well organized. They're really a military with this kind of a jihadist, end of days, apocalyptic viewpoint of the world, to borrow General Dempsey's terms. So what we need to have is a strategy to finish them off, to defeat ISIS. Not to contain them, not to react, not to secure the Mosul Dam or just help the Yazidis in a particular moment of time, but to fundamentally finish them off. And I don't think the president sees this moment for what it is, for him in particular, but for us as a country. Because think of the recruitment that they've been successful in recruiting. They have reportedly over 2,000 foreign fighters with foreign passports.
Right.
Who are right now where we know they are. And if we don't have this strategy to finish them off, which I'm not going to play armchair general, but the generals,
yes,
can articulate an air campaign with Iraqis, Peshmerga in particular, Sunnis reconstituted, and the Free Syrian Army and others. This isn't Iraq War 2.0. This is far different than that. And we have to get on this fast while it's containable. Because if we don't do this, if we don't rise to this moment, that sends the worst possible signal to tomorrow's jihadist. If it's not ISIS today, it's ISIS 2.0 tomorrow. And if we don't send the right signals, and if the president doesn't step up on this issue, we're going to rue the day.
It's great, great answer. And these,
I talk about defense policy in here quite a bit.
Yes, you do.
About the defense budget, because
yes, you do.
I come at these things from studying their budgets and capabilities, and our country's being seen as retreating from its role in the world. And the reason it's being seen is because it is. And that's because of the policies of this administration. The day Vladimir Putin invaded Crimea, the president sent us a budget that says, I want the Air Force to be the smallest it's ever been. I want the Army to be shrunk to a level we haven't seen since before World War II, and I want the Navy to be shrunk to a level and size we haven't seen since before World War I.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah, I hear a lot of things on the radio show. Don't write down a whole bunch and put on the wall, but one I put down, Chuck Hagel, Secretary of Defense, announcing the budget, saying, we can no longer assume the dominance of the U.S. on the oceans, on the ground, or in the sky. What the hell does that mean? What is he talking about? Such words should never be said.
That's right.
Especially by a Secretary of Defense. My God. Paul, I want to be sure I get through these. This gets really to, I think, what is the most interesting and encouraging part of your book, the future. And the book is The Way Forward. Someone in the audience, I am 21 and one of the few Republicans I know. Count them on the fingers of one hand. Okay. How can your leadership help energize young voters like myself to restore America's conservative principles?
So that's where I dedicate the end of the book, which is we have to basically do what, this is so fitting we're here at the Reagan Library. We have to remake that kind of a movement, but with today's problems and challenges. We have to resell the American idea. We have to resell the Constitution and the founding principles, which are as timeless and relevant today as ever before. Liberty, freedom, natural rights, government by consent of the governed, self-government under the rule of law, and show how they, when properly applied, can fix problems, can better fix poverty, can better create economic growth, an economy and a culture of inclusion, a vibrant civil society. And to young people, the way I see it is this. Do you want to have a future? Do you want to have this debt hanging over you? We're going to spend half your year working for our generation, paying off our bills before you can start working for yours. Do you want to have this government takeover of the student loan industry that's cranking up tuition costs and making you come out of school with so much debt into an economy that doesn't produce any careers or jobs or growth or advancement? And most importantly, you know, when I was a kid, you know, we had a lot of different jobs. You know, I worked at McDonald's, so I put up farm signs, painted houses, a lot of landscaping. I washed hearses before school for a year at a local funeral. Every one of those times, I was hoping that the radio station that I was listening to would play my favorite song that day. Now you just pull out your iPhone, you hit your playlist, and there it is. The point is, this generation is used to customization. They're used to being able to customize their lives how they want it to be. So how on earth would they want to gravitate toward a liberal progressive philosophy that takes these decisions away from them from critical things like their own health care, like there's retirement? And so I believe that we have to go back and resell the fact that they're the big brother party, not us. They're the ones that want to take away your control over your life, dominate the economy, intervene in the markets, crony capitalism where big government and big business pick winners and losers, and you're left standing outside, and take away your decisions to form your life and live in a vibrant civil society. That, to me, is the best selling point for our vision of what is hopefully a conservative coalition that is inclusive, that brings people in, that's aspirational and appealing. Let the left play identity politics with all their whiz-bang gizmos of 21st century metadata, data. We need to bring people together. We need to unify. We need to rally around these principles. And there are issues where we disagree from time to time, young people especially. But if you agree on liberty and freedom and free enterprise and equality of opportunity and the right to rise, that's the tallest pole in this big tent. We want you in. And then we'll agree to disagree on some other issues in a respectful, civil way when that time comes. Meanwhile, let's save the American idea. Let's save the country. Join our coalition. That's the message to young people that I think works.
A couple of personal things, and then I'm going to ask you to make a final comment about where we are and whose name is on this place. Besides The Way Forward, is there one book that you'd recommend every American put on their must-read list? And don't say von Mises, please.
Oh,
please.
Okay, you took away
Okay,
Hayek?
never mind.
No, just
Go
kidding.
ahead. You can say.
De Tocqueville, Democracy in America.
Why?
Because it was a Frenchman who came to this country who saw the secret sauce and the special nature of our system, our culture, who did more. He was the king of one-liners. He did more to describe civil society and the little platoons and the fabric of our community and our society. If we have a vibrant civil society with a healthy culture, helping take care of our problems. As Catholics, we call it subsidiarity with solidarity, but people who aren't Catholic don't know what I'm talking about. But de Tocqueville did a great job of describing what makes us so special and so unique. And he also did a lot of foretelling of what could happen if we allow government to take this space away, to crowd it out, the associations that would break down, the social capital that a lot of our friends who are sociologists talk about, that shrinks. So I would say de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, is a perfect book to read because it tells you why we're special, how it's unique, and what to look out for in the future and what to avoid.
Have you got to do it because it comes up. John from Los Angeles, have you decided to run for president yet? And if not, when will you? That's good.
Yeah.
And what will be the deciding factor?
Have not. Right now, I want to make sure our party is a party that is for something, that says not just what we're against, but what we're for. I want my governor to get reelected. I want my governor to get reelected. I want us to improve our majority in the House, and I want to get the Senate because I'm really getting tired of Harry Reid. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
You know. So we got important chores right now, and that decision to me is a 2015 decision that is Jana, myself, our family, and it's a decision that's going to take prayer. It's going to take an assessment of just where we are in life and what it takes, and it's a family decision.
Well, you know, you're my guy. You'll always be my guy. But that aside, in a good way, you know. Don't comment, please.
I'm not going to.
Don't even go near it. It's my problem. All right. But we have a good bench, don't we? Don't we have good leaders? Mm-hmm. Don't we have good young people? Name a few.
Yeah, the way I look at this is it doesn't really matter to me who, as long as it's a person who can do the Ronald Reagan, you know, all over again.
Good.
So I don't really care who it is, as long as we can do this. The way I see it, I just want to be a part of this cause and this team, and I want to go into the role that makes the most effect and the most difference. There are great guys out there. I mean, the problem with you name two or three, and then you don't name the other four. And,
I know.
You know,
right.
So we have a deep bench. What I'm excited about is I believe the conservative movement in the country is getting back to discussing our fundamentals. When I first came to Congress, you know, it was just policy issues and earmarks. You know, now we're talking about the Constitution, we're talking about natural rights, we're talking about the American idea, we're talking about big things, big differences, huge choices. So I'm actually optimistic and excited about the kind of conversations we're having. The last election, it didn't go as planned. But for 240,000 people in 4 different states, if they voted the other way, we would have won it. So I do believe, I think, here's the thing I see going forward and why I'm optimistic. The challenge that Mitt and I had in 2012 was we were basically shadowboxing against big government in theory, because President Obama passed most of his program in the first half of his first term with a Pelosi and Reid supermajority, but he delayed the implementation of these things until after the election. He held off the pile of regulations, the implementation of Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, which, if you don't know what that is, that's basically Obamacare for banks. All of that was held off, and so it was sort of our word against his word. And he's a phenomenal communicator, a great campaigner. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. It's going to lower health care costs. It's going to do all these great things. And then, come 2013, and now in 2014, we see big government in practice. We see what it really looks like. And the challenge we conservatives had in the past was we talk about regulations, we talk about an onerous government, and business owners, you know, people who are filling out the paperwork, people who are signing the fronts of the paychecks, they totally get what we were talking about. But everyday citizens who now see what this looks like and how it disrupts their personal lives are wising up and saying, wow, this doesn't look anything like they said it would. The results look nothing like the rhetoric. And so I do believe it gives us a chance, not just to say I told you so, but to be a little more weary next time somebody comes around with the same promises of progressivism. Because a Clinton presidency, a Warren presidency, whoever they're going to nominate, is a third Obama term. I think it gives us an opening as conservatives to say, this didn't work, let's not do it again. Oh, but here is a better way forward. Here's what it looks like, here's the promise, and here's what we will do. And then if we win that kind of an election, that kind of 80-like, Reagan-like election, we have the moral authority, we have the mandate, we have the consent of the governed to actually do it and fix this problem before it gets too late. And I think we can do it.
Is the way... We have a minute left. Let's close with Reagan. As part of the way forward, the title of your book, To Look Back, one of Ronald Reagan's last speeches was about remembering who we are as a people, American history. And he says directly to young people, if your parents and your teachers are not telling you the story of America, demand that they do it.
Yeah.
You're entitled to that story. That is part of their entitlement, isn't it? That is something we have to give them that we've lost.
Right, and so the point I try to make is conservatism isn't just nostalgia for the past, the days of old that we want to reconstitute. It's looking at the future like we used to look at the future. That's the point that Ronald Reagan, I think, was trying to make. And so it's taking these beautiful principles that had helped the human being reach his and her potential. It's the best system ever designed to help people escape poverty, to find lives of self-sufficiency, to reach their potential. No other country was founded on an idea like this and has done more to help the poor, to help people rise than this one. And so the nostalgia is to look at the future like we used to look at the future and to be excited and optimistic about it. And Ronald Reagan did that. I mean, he just had this ability to connect, to unite, to inspire. And boy, do we need that again.
You're doing pretty well yourself. Join me in thanking Paul Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey,
Don,
thanks.
Great.
Yeah, you bet. Oh.
Want us off? Great.